Um, Welcome to the November meeting of the ICB. I'm Roger Dunshay. I'm the acting chair, and I emphasise in capital letters, underline the word acting. This will be my first go at chairing this meeting, and so I hope you would bear with me as I learn the ropes and try and follow the great example set by Sir Neil McKay. We've got a lot of business to cover this afternoon. We've got 20 items on the agenda to be covered in 2.5 hours. So I would ask that, first of all, we take it as read that papers have been read, and secondly, that we keep our points to very much the cogent strategic concerns that people wish to raise at the meeting. Before we proceed any further, there are quite a lot of new faces around the table. Particularly welcome to Andrew Morgan, who is the Chair in Common for South and Shropcom. So welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Chair.
And we have various just reminders of who we all are, just to go around the room quickly. So let's just start off with you, David, at the bottom there, just to tell us who you are.
Dave Bennett, I'm the Associate Non-Executive Director, Chair of the Finance Committee.
Yes, good afternoon, Martin Evans, Non-Executive Director at Robert Jones, representing Harry and taking over temporary chair, subject to approval of the people, culture and inclusion.
Okay. Welcome, Martin.
I'll go again. Andrew Morgan, Chair in Common at Shropshire Community Health and Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust.
Okay, so Paul Watling, I'm the Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and Health Systems at Telford and Wrekin.
I'm David Sidway, the Chief Executive at Telford and Wrekin Council.
Andy Beckley, Chief Executive at Shropshire Council.
Needy Paul, one of the non-exec directors.
Anne McLaughlin, I'm not Neil Carr, but he's asked me to attend because he's being called into a critical incident meeting in Staffordshire.
Okay. Welcome.
I was coming anyway for item 14.
Thank you.
Vanessa Watley, Chief Nursing Officer, and NHS Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin.
Meredith Vivian, Non-Executive Director, ICB.
I'm Claire Skidmore, I'm Chief Finance Officer for NHS STW.
Afternoon everybody, Simon Whitehouse, Chief Exec, NHS Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin.
Okay. Roger, Acting Chair.
Alison Smith, Chief Business Officer for the ICB.
Claire Holcombe, Board Secretary.
Ian Beck, Chief Delivery Officer at the ICB.
Lorna Clarkson, Chief Medical Officer at the ICB.
Jo Williams, Interim Chief Exec at Shrewsbury and Telford.
Patricia Davis, Chief Exec at Shropshire Community NHS Trust.
Deborah Shepherd, Primary Care Partner.
Ian Chan, Primary Care Partner. Nigel Lee, Chief Strategy Officer for the ICB and also Director of Strategy itself.
Julian Pope, I'm Chair of the Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin GP Board.
Afternoon everyone, Stacey Keegan, Foundation Trust Partner Member and Chief Exec of Robert Jones Acting Fund.
Lynn Corley, Chief Officer of Health Watch Shropshire.
Council Twain, Lead Officer at Health Watch Telford and Wrekin.
Thank you. And we have Gareth right on the call, is that right? Yeah. Hi, Gareth.
Gareth Wright, I'm the Head of Operations at the IPB.
Thank you. Good. I think we thought that Trevor Macmillan, the other non-exec and Deputy Chair, might be joining us, but he may be coming in later on the call. Okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest on any item on the agenda? No. Minutes of the last meeting held on the 25th. On the 25th of September. Any points of accuracy, omissions, changes that colleagues wish to make? No. Okay, so I take those as approved. The action list from the previous meeting. Apologies, this wasn't updated with the papers that were circulated. The good news is that a lot of them have been completed. There's just a couple of issues that, from the summary that I have, yeah, there's one issue for Nigel. It's around checking data around waiting times for first outpatients and give timeline for communicating reports to GPs. Have you looked at that one at all, Nigel?
So this is on behalf of SATH, because Julian and colleagues in general practice were keen to get updated information about waiting times. I haven't gotten anything further on that. I know the teams at SATH are trying to look at communicating that on a regular basis. Obviously there's significant pressure on waiting times for a whole range of different specialties. We used to have a report which was pretty manually produced before the changes to the patient admin system and some of the work on provision of data and information. So I need to take that back and work with operational colleagues at SATH.
Okay, I'll take Paul and then Joe. Paul?
Sorry, it's not on this item, it's something else.
Something else, okay, Joe.
Just a thought, Chair, we've got a meeting on the 17th of December with GP colleagues. Whilst not trying to extend that meeting, we could probably pick some of those areas up to see what would be helpful for us to communicate.
Because it's a hugely important area. Yeah, okay, thank you.
We can pick that up.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Trevor. Okay, Paul?
Yeah, it was just about the papers for the meeting really, and timing of that for us. It was very late to get the papers, and although we've you said we'll take it as read, reading and skimming through on the night before is maybe a difference. And what I would say is, can we have the papers at least 7 days in advance, please?
So the papers were published on Friday. But I just wanted to check. So and our business rules are 3 days in advance in terms of that. And I recognise that the reason for that is the timing of this meeting linked to the performance data and the publication of the performance data and making sure we've got the most accurate information in there. We will absolutely work and look at the timeliness in terms of that and the publication of the papers, because your point is a fair one. I think there's another important point that I will pick up, which is, I was going to pick this up anyway, Chair, at the start of my report, which is the length of this pack of papers is not where we'd want it to be at all. And part of the challenge there is the ask that was made of us around the EPRR update. So the amount of papers that are in there in the appendices is really significant. And that part of that is the way we are assessed against them is about how they appear at the board. And then that flows through in terms of the assessment process. So I recognise that. The other piece that's been published recently is the NHS England guidance around the insightful board, and so the ask of execs and teams will be going forwards to make sure that we're using the guidance from the insightful board to help shape the papers and the pack. But I absolutely acknowledge and recognise this pack is not where we would want that to be going forwards, but some of that is the challenge we've got around an expectation of how some of this needs to be presented and demonstrated. But your point is well made and heard.
Thank you. Okay. David, did you have a point to make?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I missed the opportunity on the minutes previously, just on page 19 relating to the Health Watch report, just for information to the board that the Health and Wellbeing Board will be looking at that detail tomorrow at that meeting, and also we will be including that place-related discussion in January in the form of TWIP as well, just for information, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Lynn?
Just a quick one from me, just to say that just due to an admin error, neither Health Watch have seen the papers until a few minutes before the meeting, so just to let you know. If I ask anything silly, you know why.
It's never silly, Lynn, but understand the point.
Okay, well, first of all, a profuse apologies to everyone about the lateness and perhaps non-receipt of some of the papers, and also that we need to get our act together about the content, the strategic ownership of the executive reports, etc., because it's not fair to try and read 600 pages in a short period of time. So thanks for those comments, and we will do better next time. Okay, let's move on to the next item, which is the Chair's report. I've done a Chair's report this time just to give everybody a flavour as to what we've been doing for the last 3 weeks. First of all, thank you to everybody for your help and cooperation and support in my induction to the role. The process of recruitment for the substantive chair is in hand, and hopefully that will take just a few months to complete. I would only raise one issue of note, is that I attended the ICB chairs meeting on Monday. This is across the Midlands. That covers all the patch from the East Midlands to the West Midlands, from Northamptonshire and Leicestershire, all the way across to where we are. And there were three things that came out of that meeting, and I think they're pretty stark messages. First of all, we need to start thinking about 25-26 now. There is no more new money on this. It's all going to be used up for other things. There's nothing new, and there will be difficult decisions ahead in terms of how we allocate our resources going forward. I think the other aspect to this is that we must take full cognizance of the government's intentions regarding the new operating model for ICBs and the expectation of the three shifts, and I'll just repeat those very quickly: shifting from acute to community, from analog to digital, and from
illness to prevention.
Sickness to prevention. Yeah. So those are the three issues. And discussing it with Simon and non-exec colleagues on Monday, we need to get the meat on the bone about how we're going to do this. It's all very well having endless policy documents coming out from the centre. The nitty-gritty will be in the delivery of these changes. And it's going to be tough. These things are never easy. But it's interesting talking to colleagues in the two councils about how they have done these sorts of things and these radical changes. I think we can learn from our colleagues in local government about how you make radical changes to services that can succeed. So this is going to be very much a system effort, a team effort, but above all, we can't shy away from the difficult decisions, because they will be difficult. Thank you. Moving on then to the next, sorry, any more questions on my report? No, good. Moving on to then the questions from members of the public. Thank you very much for the questions that we have received. I think we received, is it 5 questions? 4 questions from the members of the public. I think they were all very good questions about service delivery and very much things that we should be answering in full, and, dare I say it, thinking some of our services about how they are provided, because some of them are quite shocking in my view, about things that are happening, bureaucratic processes that are being followed unnecessarily, etc., etc. So we will reply to those questions in full in due course. But thank you very much for those that have raised those questions. They are very valuable, and we will learn lessons from them. Resident story. Vanessa.
Thank you very much, Roger. I'd like to introduce you to our team here. Sarah Davis is Director of Health and Science at Telford College, and with her is Callum, Claudia and Joel, who are all T-level students. These are technical qualifications that have been introduced over the last few years after GCSE, and I think it's really important that you're here, part of our pipeline, and our really valued college that supports you. So over to Sarah.
Thank you, Vanessa. Good afternoon, everyone. Sarah Davis, Director of Health and Science at Telford College. It's great to see so many familiar faces. I'm also a midwife by background, and so when T-levels were introduced, I was really excited because I recognised the gap that exists between further education and the realities of the workforce. So about T-levels, first of all, T-levels were designed by employers because employers recognise that graduates from further education were not meeting the skills needs. So take nursing, for example, A-level students were leaving university with excellent theory, but just not lasting once they got onto the wards. So T-levels has been designed and mapped to apprenticeship standards so that they meet the needs of the employers. And in a minute, you're going to get to speak to Joel, Callum, and Claudia about their experiences, and you will not believe that these students are 16, 17. So T-levels then, they are a 2-year course equivalent to 3 A-levels, similar to BTECs, but the unique difference is that they are heavily reliant on the industry placement. So each T-level student spends 315 hours in a work placement. We're really lucky that we've collaborated with the ICS from the start. It's been about 4 years of collaboration to get meaningful placement, so our students are placed all across the system. They offer the same progression routes that any university student would have, so these students can go directly into employment, they can go on high-level apprenticeships, or they can go straight into university if they hold the UCAS points. But the difference is that you are producing a work-ready individual who has spent 2 years working in the system. We at Telford College as well, I'm glad Trevor's here, you know he's in the back of our heads, is that we've got a unique partnership with Keele University at the moment, so that we are able to offer progression opportunities locally with Keele University. So we'll be delivering some of the nursing for 2025 in Telford with a view to open this up to other specialities as well. What I would say has been unique about our T-level journey is that we've been recognised nationally for T-level delivery. So the work that we did in preparation for T-levels has been recognised by the Department for Education. We have to speak nationally, haven't we, Callum? About our model. What was it to say? So with T-levels, they came around, they were introduced 5 years ago, and what a lot of training providers did was take on T-level students and didn't worry about the placements until they got the students. For me, it was crucial that we got placements right. Being from an NHS background, I understand how important the placements were. So we did it the other way around. We went to the ICS and we said, what placements can you provide? And then we recruited to that number, and we made sure that we had the highest calibre students who were suitable to progress. All this started with Ali's Trumper and the People Collaborative, and we started at trust level, it wasn't working, so we had to take it to system level to make sure that those placements were suitable. We have service level agreements in place, we're embedded within across all the different trusts, and our students are all over the system. What we have identified as risk areas at the moment, what Vanessa is aware of, and Ali has raised as well, and I know that Stacey's taking it on here, there's risks to this continuing, the volume of placements will always remain an issue. We need to remember these are our pipeline. If we invest in young people now, we've got them for life. We know, I've worked in Shropshire in further education for 14 years, and it's really disappointing to see how many people leave the local area and go elsewhere. So if we can keep them and retain them, they'll hopefully stay and be our future workforce. The other risk area that Stacey knows about is the occupational health clearance. So they are part of the team. They spend 2 weeks in Healthcare Support Worker Academy. They are working hands-on. They deal with all the bodily fluids that a healthcare support worker will, whether they like it or not. So we have to make sure that their occupational health cleared. At the moment, we're meeting that cost, so we're looking for support from the system to be able to find a solution to do that. Because without these placements, we're not going to have these excellent students. So I'll hand over to these three. I think you're going to start, Callum.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm Callum McCarthy, I'm going to go to college, obviously. I'm going to talk about the start where I am now, kind of the entire journey. So it all started off in college, obviously, with the high-level educators and teachers, and then a two-week training academy, which got us prepped and ready with all the manual handling skills and getting to learn and use all the equipment and getting comfortable with that for then after placement. And in these 2 weeks we got comfortable enough to go on to placement. After this we did go on to placement. Onto placement for actual patients, not the dummies we have in the facility. It's very different, experiencing their emotions and how to deal with them, and how to deal with your own emotions most of the time. Getting used to all the things you would see on placement. Bloody fluids has. And yeah, it was very hard to get into, but now I feel very comfortable and I'm enjoying placement.
And what ward do you want?
Ward 8, MMEC. Last year I was on general medical. Before it was, now it's been changed. Yeah, I'm much more specialised than it was last year, but I'm enjoying it. I'm learning new things.
Do you want to say where you were last week?
I was at a competition called World Skills last week. It's a nationwide competition for all different specialities. So it can be like engineering, mechanics, health, and it's a tournament kind of thing where if you do the best, you go to the next round. I was fortunate enough to get into the top 8 in the nation, where I got 4th.
There's no way that Callum would have been prepared for Will's Guild without his T-level placement, so we can thank the ICS for those placements. And obviously the excellent teachers, because all our teachers are clinicians as well, so we're really lucky. Right, who's going next? Claudia?
Hello, my name is Claudia and I'm also one of the T-level students. So last year I was placed in Ward 11, which was, I really liked it. It was very busy. There were some things that I saw that kind of like threw me off, but I had the help and support of the staff and my placement coordinator. So on my first day of placement, there was some things that I wasn't quite used to and I was a bit worried about, but I talked to my placement coordinator and then they sorted it out for me, which I was really glad because I didn't want to be thrown off by the ward and the things I saw, so I was happy that I got like the support that I needed. This year I'm in elective surgical hub. It's very different from ward 11. It's less busy and less stressful, so I like it there so far. And I just get to admit patients in, basically do their obs and just have conversations with them, get them ready to go to theatre. So I'm enjoying it. I like how I'm in 2 different places, not experiencing the same ward. So I've been liking it. And thanks to the 2 weeks training that we had before we started the placement, I've really, I can see where, like what to do and I'm not thrown off by everything. Like I know what to expect. I know like how to wash patients, how to feed them. Thanks to the training that the academy gave us and to the teachers as well for preparing us to do that. So I'm just looking forward to just finishing the course and heading to my future goal, which I want to be a paediatric nurse when I finish the course. So I'm thinking of either going to uni, and they introduced the TNA route, the nursing associate. I'm also thinking of doing that. That's really piqued my interest. So hopefully when I'm done, I could see where this course can take me. Yeah.
And stay local?
Yeah.
Joel was a very last minute standing because Claudia's hurt her fingers, but they managed to get here in time, so Joel was totally unprepared for this, so he was thrown in at the deep end. Come on, Joel, you can do it.
Hello, my name is Joel. Nice to meet you all. So last year, I did my first placement in Ward 11 with Claudia. It was nephrology and general medicine. This was general medicine. It was basically full of dementia patients. So in the first year, I was hands-on with dementia people. I wasn't that surprised with dementia people because my grandfather also had dementia and I was used to taking care of him. But it was still different because it was people I didn't know and it helped me develop compassion and empathy towards others. I also learned how to communicate with dementia patients. It was really, the first year was basically no, there wasn't much learning about nephrology, but there was a lot of other stuff like communication, that sort of stuff. And the second year, I'm in Ward 6, that's cardiac. There, the patients are mostly mobile, and since there's common care unit, CCU, so I can learn more about the cardiac system. And all the staff there are really friendly and they are willing to teach me about it. So there I have learned a lot about heart, about the angina, ECGs, and how to read them, how to spot atrial fibrillation or anything like that. Yeah, so actually I want to be a doctor. So there's been some routes from doing access course as a T-level student. So if that's not possible for me, I'll do nursing, then I'll transfer to a medicine course to do the GEMSAT, and in the future I'll hopefully be a doctor.
None of this would be possible without the ICS support, so it's a big thank you from us as well. Ali Trumper and I wrote a paper to get some funding from the Department of Education to provide an industry placement coordinator. Unfortunately, that funding's coming to an end, so we are worried about that as well, because this person works across the systems and makes sure that all the placements are mapped out as well. But a big thank you from us.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Before you go, any points any colleagues wish to raise around the table?
I think Paul.
Paul, yeah.
Just want to say thank you, and thank you to the young people who are here. It's great to see people looking for futures in the NHS. I think it's really important. Can I just suggest we have a conversation about how we could work together on certainly on a therapeutic side,
yes,
in terms of adult social care, but
yeah,
also in other parts of the system. Maybe there are other opportunities in terms of placement.
Yeah, we just started the support and the therapist pathway with a view to do that, to get provided, because there is more to the health and social care than nursing. So
yeah,
we're looking at exploring other avenues as well.
That's
So
great.
that'd be really good.
Love to talk to you about that.
Thank you. Martin?
Chair, just to say that we had a similar presentation from T-level at the last People, Culture and Inclusion Committee. Great to see, great initiative. From a people perspective, what an opportunity we've got here to really develop the pipeline moving forward. So just to say that it was well received at that committee and very, very supportive. Thank you.
So thank you, Chair. Sarah, Callum, Claudia, Joel, fantastic. Sarah knows I'm a big supporter and a big advocate in this space, as is Stacey and Vanessa. The partnership and the opportunity with the college, with Keele University, with Telford and Wrekin Council is a really important one in this. And the opportunity in terms of that future workforce, tackling some of the workforce challenges that we've got, but also supporting young people across Telford and Wrekin, across Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, to have the aspirations of a career in health and care is fantastic. So to hear your experiences is great. So thank you for finding time to come and do that this afternoon. And I think we should look to grow that partnership, and this is an area that we should be developing as one of the main aims of the integrated care system in terms of that future workforce, and tackling and supporting young people to have that aspiration, that ambition in our system. Thank you.
Just a final comment. I found that fascinating talk. Thank you very much for your presentation, all the content and such like. A personal reflection, I was in your position 45 years ago. So if you don't watch out, you can end up like me. But thank you again very much, and we wish you all success in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. We're not going to stay, because they've got to go back to place.
Thanks again. Okay. Well, now the Chief Exec's now going to try and beat that.
How do you follow that, Chair? Thank you. Thanks. Thanks. Thank you. Okay, so you can't follow that, can you, really? I will assume that paper's been read. We've already touched on a number of areas. A number of us from across the system, local authority, NHS colleagues, are heading to an event tomorrow in Birmingham around the 10-year plan and the engagement process around that. We've touched on the 3 shifts that are set out in the paper, and I think as a future development programme and session with the board, we need to think about how our integrated care strategy, our joint forward plan, and the 3 shifts align in terms of the work that we need to be doing, and have we got our priorities in the right place, and have we got that broad oversight and insight in the right place. I've already picked up on the insightful board guidance and the publication of that, so I won't touch on that. There is some examples and updates and the progress being made in terms of the green strategy, but recognise there is more to do in that space. In the appendices and in the detail, there is the updates to the governance handbook, and there's an update on the latest integrated care programme, the integrated care partnership meeting. My final point isn't in the paper, Chair, but is just to recognise the current pressures that services are under in terms of urgent and emergency care across the system, in all parts of the system, and to recognise and thank colleagues for the work that's taking place to support that, but also to recognise that there are waits that are longer than we would want them to be, and that's impacting on patients and residents. But I know that our clinical teams and our managerial teams across all sectors are working really hard to deal with that demand and to support patients and residents as much as possible. But important from sitting here today that I recognise and thank colleagues for that work and effort, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Simon? David?
Thank you. Just on page 34, 35 of our pack, reference to the 10-year health plan, I guess we just restate our offer of support to connect in from a comms perspective to engage as many residents of Telford and Wrekin as we possibly can around this 10-year plan and proposal. We've got different, I guess, reach than the NHS have in terms of our communities, and I've just restated the offer because all of us want engagement, and I guess that might be similar from a Shropshire perspective as well. So just wanted to record that offer again, Chair. Thank you.
That's really helpful, David.
Okay.
And Alison, with the team, if we can pick that up in terms of promoting and pushing that and using that with both councils, that's really appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Nettie.
On the 10-year plan, I guess some of that will eventually then come to the Strategic Commissioning Committee, I hope, to look at, how we commission services, I guess, for the ICB. Just a question.
Yeah, no. So look, the 10-year plan clearly is the government's response to what does the future look like in terms of the NHS, and it's very specific NHS as well in terms of the 10-year plan. Clearly, we will need to make sure and be cited and be mindful of the content of that when we start to look at refreshing our joint forward plan and all the work that goes through that, and that absolutely needs to work through the Strategic Commissioning Committee, because we need to have a line of sight, don't we? What do we commission? How does that support the delivery of the 10-year plan through the 3 channel shifts that's talked about? So absolutely, Nitty, and please do challenge us on that and hold us to that in terms of making sure that we've got the right conversations and the right agendas in place.
Just a quick one on the back of that.
Yeah.
Do you feel, Simon, we have our own operating framework, with the strategic review we had, is now, I'm just asking the question because I don't know, is it ready to meet that 10-year plan, the shift that we're talking about? I'm not quite sure, that's why I'm asking.
So having not seen the 10-year plan yet, that's difficult to answer explicitly without the content being there, but it's a really fair challenge. I mean, I think, if we go back to our operating model and we talked about the 4 roles and the 4 principles in terms of system convener, system assurance, system partner, and system facilitator, I think they absolutely stand up to what the Secretary of State announced in his speech 2 weeks ago in terms of the NHS providers conference that he spoke at. I think the way that we've already thought about having a Director of Strategic Commissioning in our organisational structure is different to many other ICBs, but again, the tone around being ready for strategic commissioning, I think we're well placed in terms of that. I think the areas where we remain probably light and will need to look at is in the digital aspects of things, but I think that's across the system, not just limited to the ICB. And of course, I think, given we were asked to take 30% of our running cost out within 12-18 months of being set up, then we've tried to manage that in the right way while still being fit for purpose to deliver the ask. So I think we're as well placed as we could be, but clearly we'll need to continue, evolve and develop as we see the detail that underpins what the ask is and what we're expected to deliver on.
Thank you, Simon.
I mean, just to build on that point, Nitty, when the Neds met on Monday, we mentioned this to Simon around the interlinking of Darcy, the new operating model, the integrated care strategy which goes through the ICP, the joint forward programme. It's a complex matrix of interdependencies here, and Simon has very kindly offered to try and drop a briefing paper to explain how all this is going to work. Okay. Nigel.
Otherwise called the 10-year plan.
Nigel.
You're a very brave man, that's all I can say.
I was going to offer to support Simon in that, as you'd expect.
You didn't need to offer, Nigel.
No, absolutely.
But thank you.
Yeah. All I was just going to say was just to reinforce the point I think you made, Simon, that we absolutely will take that through the Strategic Commission Committee, and as you know, Nettie, we've already had some of those discussions. I think the only bit I would say is, and whilst the translation of the 10-year, as that develops, will form into our joint forward plan. As colleagues around the table will know, the STW joint forward plan is indeed that. It's NHS plus the appropriate with partners. And so I do think it's important that we take that through the Strategic Commission Committee, but I also think it's really important that we retain really close interlinks with the Health and Wellbeing Boards and places, because as we talked about at the Integrated Care Partnership meeting recently, that bit around prevention, we really need both the expertise and the reach and linking with our directors of public health and colleagues across the local authorities and wider. So I think it is a complex web, both from a governance and also how we develop that.
Yeah, one final point, Chair, because the other piece is the changes to the governance, the other bit, Nitty, around our 2 place boards and the role David and Andy are playing in terms of that, and really thinking about what happens at place and how we get really into that agenda. If we think about the national message in terms of neighbourhood health and care models as being the building block of any future sustainable system, I think that becomes even more important and feels as though absolutely the right decision in terms of formalising those 2 place boards, 2 place committees as subcommittees of the board, so we've got that line of sight as well, with Chief Exec leadership.
And of course we mustn't forget the money in all of this, which is going to be very difficult. Okay, thank you, Simon. Did you have a point about governance?
Yeah, there was just one point around approval being asked around some changes to the governance handbook as a result of some statutory guidance on conflicts of interest that were published by NHS England back in September, and also a slight amendment to the decision making on retire and return requests for ICB staff, moving from the Remuneration Committee to the Chief Executive and Executive Group. I'm just looking for approval of that, Roger.
Happy to approve. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is the System Board Assurance Framework. Simon again, please.
I'm going to go to Alison, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So again, we're presenting to you both the System Board Assurance Framework, which has been updated. In addition, we're also, as requested at the last meeting, circulating the risks that are strategic operational risk register level that score 15 and above for oversight as well. So this is to just set the scene really for your further discussions today, to ensure that we're capturing the risk as discussed, either in committees that you may be aware of or in this forum, so that we can make sure that this is updated at the end of this meeting or further information and action is taken.
Okay. Can I ask a question? Do you feel that the ownership by the committees of our BAF and operational risk is working?
Yeah, I think we've got some really good engagement now. Now we've started with the new governance process and the changes to the committees. The committees, I think, have taken on. Certainly the chairs have been very engaged in this. I think we've got some work happening around SHIP and TWIP, and I'm in close conversations with Penny and with Sarah on developing that so that we get it embedded at every meeting. And thanks to Andy and Dave for their leadership on that, and Stacey as well. We've got some actions that we need to take around embedding on the People Committee, but again, GG, I've been supporting us with that, so I think there's a clear action plan that we've got in place that we're working to.
Okay, thank you. Any further points on the BAF or the SOAR?
It's a different point, Chair, sorry. But I've got a couple of notes to say. Somebody's is sitting in the waiting room trying to join the Teams meeting, but can't get in. But I couldn't see anybody in there, so no, okay, sorry.
No, okay. Okay, we'll move on then to the winter planning mitigations and pressures. Jo, are you happy to lead on this?
I am, yes. If Gareth would like to contribute to any part of
yes,
it,
yeah,
as he's done all of the work, he needs to also say.
Okay.
So I guess presenting it as the QEC lead, and I think to start off really in terms of where Simon started or ended his conversation, we call it winter planning, but actually there's a seasonal variance in terms of that we need as a system to respond to, and it's been very challenging the last 3 days. So I guess first of all I just wanted to say thank you to all our system partners, because we've approached the pressures as the system. What will probably get lost as part of the last few days and over the coming weeks, ironically in the paper it does talk about November being the most challenging months. So I hope you don't remind me of that comment, Chair, but it is living up to what we've said in the paper. But the paper takes us through, we've got a series of improvement plans that we're working on. We've also got, it describes in terms of the approach that we're taking over the next few months. As you'd expect, there's also some schemes in which we have seen that we put in through the next few weeks in terms of how we support partners, and also there's a system bed modelling. And I think it's important we remember this isn't also just about putting more and more beds into the system. This is about how we work differently, and that's where the role of system partners have come into play over the last few weeks. We have seen improvements. So we have seen improvements in terms of length of stay. We've seen in terms of our medically fit for discharges gone down from 4.5 days to 2.5 days. We have got some more ambition in that, but we know that's been tricky to get us that far, but we are still working on that. And again, the teams from local authority actually being in the hospital, part of the team, that we can see an improvement in terms of that. We are seeing an increase in terms of the number of patients that are turning up at ED as well. So as I said, I don't want to lose the fact that there is some good work that we've started to see the improvements on that. In terms of SAF approach to this, I think there's 4 areas that with system partners that we're working on. One is the improvements that we need to continue to see in terms of ambulance delays. Also the number of patients that we're admitting into the department. Long waits then being seen in ED. And I think the other one is in terms of assessment areas. And obviously the last board that I attended, we did have a discussion in terms of escalation areas. I think one of the things that I'd like to share with the committee is that those areas are used as escalation, i.e. they're not open all the time. And that's important when actually we're surging through activity. And I think the other thing I just wanted to pick up, and it's not because Lorna's sat at the side of me, is we're also approaching this, the operational nursing and medical, so with Vanessa and the team, we're actually working together in terms of understanding some of the pressures. So there's some of the things that I wanted to pick up. There's a lot of information in terms of the paper, in terms of the dynamic risk assessment. That is all Gareth's work, so that I take no credit for that. And we have been praised by NHS England in terms of the approach that we've taken. We're certainly testing it out over the last few days, and I think what we'll start to see is that being rolled out in December. And we did have a winter assurance visit, which I think was 2 weeks ago now. And the feedback that we got from NHS England was that they could see that we were approaching this as a system, that all partners were involved in it. All partners were able to present as well, so I think that was good, that it wasn't just one person who was dominating the conversation, it was how we all approached it. But there was a recognition in that we're going to have some challenging days ahead, but actually they felt that the 2 actions that we got was around the bed base, in terms of have we got enough beds in terms of across the 2, Shrewsbury and Telford, and that's why we've put some of the actions in to mitigate that, and the other was around the appropriate use and making sure that we maximise use in the discharge lounge. So I think it was a really positive visit. So they were the only areas I just wanted to cover, Chair. As I say, there's a lot in that. The paper, I think, has gone to Quality and Performance Committee before, but I think members may have seen this in a different iteration, and that's because we've updated the paper. So apologies if anybody, I'm not a member of that committee, but apologies if people have seen it and think it looks slightly different. That's because we've made some progress since. So that's all I wanted to pick up, and anything I've missed, I will kindly thank Mr. Betts for leaving me the paper.
Thank you. Gareth, do you have anything to add?
I think Joe's covered that very well. I think the only thing I would add is that it was a different winter from ones we've previously viewed, in that there is no national pot of money that is being spent on this. This may be a reflection of the new climate that the new government is operating within. But whereas in previous years there may have been an attempt to buy out our winter pressures, principally by injecting extra beds into systems, as Joe outlined, that is there this year, and nationally guidance is that we're relying on process improvement as well as delivering on the existing 2-year national recovery programme for emergency care. So that does make things challenging for us. And the principal update to the paper since the Quality Performance Committee saw it is to add in the extra mitigations that we're seeking to put in place, many of which require funding, but Ian Bett is working hard with regional and national colleagues to try to secure us some extra funding just to top up the improvement programme that we've already got running. I mean, that improvement programme has been externally validated by PricewaterhouseCoopers, who've been providing support of us. Their judgment is that we're doing the right things with our programme, but also recognise that we're not going to be able to deliver enough effect quickly enough to address the shortfall that we've got entering with it. And hence these mitigation are what we're seeking to put in place just to ease the pressures, but we're absolutely feeling the pressure at the moment, and that's partly why Ian's had to lead the meeting today to manage our overall system response.
Okay. Thanks, Gareth. Deborah?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to comment. It was an interesting paper to read, and I'm pleased to see the improvements that have been made. I think the point that this needs to be a system effort is important, but we do need to recognise the impact of and on all parts of the system. So I was disappointed that there was really very little reference to community services or indeed to primary care, who bear the brunt of a lot of the additional work, and particularly when we are avoiding admissions. That means there are far more people being kept at home who are really quite sick and complex, who previously probably would have been cared for in hospitals. And with the pressures on primary care and general practice at the moment, the capacity to support that is hard to come by and hard to manage. We've talked about how the system can recognise the challenges in capacity in primary care, how we can report that and how the system might respond to that. But I don't think, and my GP colleagues will probably support me, that GPs have felt supported particularly, rather that they are being called upon to support, and they will do as best they can. But it does have to be a united effort, and we all have to support each other. And in the same way that ED is not allowed to say that they close, nor is general practice. And we do struggle sometimes with the impact of other services. Still, I think it happens less than it used to, but still saying, sorry, we're at capacity, we can't help you, for support for services that we might have expected them to provide. So I'd just like to ask the system just to remember that we're out there, and perhaps to consider how we can help general practice to feel supported when they are at capacity too.
I think you raised some very important, valid points. And I think there's a learning point there about reporting in the future, bringing in the primary care perspective and the community perspective as well. Can that be done, Gareth or Joe? To get that more holistic view?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective as the newly chair of UEC, I guess it's how people are very welcome to that. It's how we get your voice through that, which obviously with Simon and Gareth we can, because we definitely need you by our side. So it's not a deliberate act in any way at all, but certainly can pick that up. Okay,
so maybe an action point for Ian to have a look at going forward.
Yeah.
Julian.
Thank you, Chair. Just really to follow up on what Deborah said, I mean, obviously I support what Deborah said, but two particular points in this paper. One is about the winter illness service that's one of the winter schemes. Just to point out that we discussed this morning at the GP board, and that scheme is actually in Shrewsbury for Shrewsbury PCN practices, and is a very valuable scheme, seeing 70 to 100 appointments a day over the winter for winter illnesses. But it is not funded with any extra money. This is funded through the capacity and access improvement money through the PCN DES, and that means that that isn't extra resource coming to primary care, and other PCNs are spending their CAIP money in different ways. So it isn't a consistent scheme across the whole of the county. So it's very valuable and it's worthwhile being in this report, but it needs to be highlighted that this is purely for Shrewsbury PCM practices and not a scheme for the wider sort of Shropshire public. And it does say it's been done in Telford, but I'm not entirely sure whether how Telford PCMs are using their CIP money, but I don't think it is to provide a winter illness service. The other point that came up at the GP board this morning was because the Shropdoc medical director attends that board, and I mentioned I'd seen in the paper the one mitigation around the GP presence in care coordination and the single point of assessment at CCC, and he said as far as he was aware that hadn't been agreed or confirmed, but clearly I think from what we just heard from Gareth that's probably one of the mitigations that's still awaiting financial approval. So it was just to be clear within the table about the winter mitigations, are the others are they unfunded and they're not actually in place? Are they just schemes that may possibly be in place, or are they some of them actually working at the moment? So it's for the board to be aware of that.
Thank you. We'll take that away and ensure that's covered. Meredith.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to fully understand what, in response to Deborah's comments, which are very enlightening. You used the word support several times, and the response is we need to make sure you're included. Can I just be clear what you mean by support?
I think, first of all, it's recognising the struggles that primary care has to maintain capacity and to see everybody who needs to be seen. And we know that access to GPs is a concern for our population as well. But often it is challenged when people are absolutely operating to maximum safe limits and often beyond. And how the system recognises that. In that we frequently get notifications of when our secondary care colleagues are under particular pressure, but it doesn't go back easily the other way. We have got a very simple reporting mechanism that we have put in place that practices can submit to the system, but not particularly seen any system response or even acknowledgement of those. And that's been in place for some time now. I know it's on the agenda for later on, but things like the primary care, secondary care interface and understanding how we work best with each other without one part of the system that's at capacity, just handing it out. And traditionally, general practice has been a bit of a sink and a mop-up service for where there are things that don't easily fit in anywhere else. But we struggle to do that. Actually, we do have our own contract with the specific things that we need to deliver. We don't just deliver everything that nobody else quite identifies as theirs.
Okay, thank you. Nitty?
So just quickly going back to your paper, Joe, just looking at some of the data in there. I mean, I'm really concerned that we don't actually, our response is not data-led. And this has been like forever. It's not just, now. I've been around for a very, very long time, grand old lady now. But the data that we need to define, how we need to commission our services and how we need to respond during winter, I'd just love to see what is the complexity of the issues that we're seeing in ED and what's spilling over into medical admissions unit, what's going on to the wards, what are the kind of patients we're seeing, what's the data around that. We do need to see much more of that, I think, to understand what our responses should be. Having spent some time, sometimes at GP front ends and other A&Es, not here I have to say, a lot of decision making is left to more junior colleagues, and I don't know what the situation is here. I'd love to also see, the seniority of people that are making these decisions, because junior folks, many, many hundreds of years ago, I decided to do telephone triage, as it was called in those days, and I put my junior doctors on it. The biggest mistake of my life. I shouldn't have done that. It should have been the more senior GPs who should have been making those decisions, because they're able to make those decisions. So just love to see what the complexity of the patients are, who they are, why they're ending up in hospital, what response then we have to that, because otherwise it'll always be we need more money to do this, or we need more beds to do this. And that system left that we've been talking about, that system shift in community, not just dumping everything into primary care, but really understanding what's needed in primary care to pick some of that up is going to be important.
Okay.
And that comes back to digital for me. How do you actually collect some of this data and how clear is it?
Okay, thanks, Nitty. Joe?
Yeah, so if I may, I'm just going to pick up on the 2 points. I think from a
GP response, I think, and Gareth's probably going to despair, but there's little point in having a dynamic risk assessment without you being part of it, because we can clearly be able to see what's happening by involving. So I think we probably need to be a bit cleverer with that. So we can take that as an action in terms of understanding the pressures. So I think there's probably all the data there. It's how we bring it together and then make the sensible decisions. I think, if I may, in terms of what we describe it, this is a seasonal winter paper that describes the actions we're taking to address winter. I think in terms of the point that Nitty made are really important. We have all that data and we are doing that work, but that's being held in the UEC improvement plan. And I think we did talk at the last meeting actually, whether there's an opportunity we bring to life just how much work is being undertaken in that environment, and it's huge. So I think if I take, for example, so I was at PRH yesterday, so I know exactly what happened on that site yesterday. There is senior decision makers that are not only in the department that are checking the patients for admission and triage, also in terms of on the ambulance. So we've got that level of data. So I don't want to be defensive in terms of this paper. I agree with the points you're making. You don't need to be defensive
at all, Joe. All I'm asking is that we need to see it. We just all of us need to see it. And I think at a strategic commissioning committee, I mean, I would just love to see some of that so we can make some strategic decisions.
Can I just, we need to move on, but I'm going to sum up at the end with some really good ideas. Lynn and then David.
You have got Trevor on the screen as well, Chair.
And Trevor, yeah. So Lynn first.
Thank you, Chair. Just a patient public perspective from me. I did 2 engagement events last week. One was a cancer event and one was a dementia event. And the people I spoke to are certainly experiencing the pressures that you're talking about, and they were particularly anxious about primary care. So I do support what Deborah was saying about that. And I suppose my concern is that we've got a large part of our population, particularly older people and vulnerable people, who cannot battle the system, and they are going to fall through the gaps. And so I'm also very mindful, though, that as soon as pressure eases on one part of our system, it will just move to another and ad infinitum. So I think there's still work to be done about explaining to the public what choices they've got if they can't get through on the phone to somebody. Nobody I spoke to last week was aware of what 111 could offer. And they weren't really aware of anything beyond their GP. So I do think we've still got some work we can do to help people to understand that just because they don't get through on the phone, they're not alone. That's all I would like to say.
Thank you. Very, very good point. David and then Trevor and then Simon to sum up.
Thank you, Chair. Take this away from Deborah's comment, which I fully support, but I guess on page 43, 2.3.1.2, to Joe's point, there's been a big improvement, and the outcomes for our residents, there's a direct correlation to it in terms of the length of stay, the no criteria to resolve. I think we need to, this system is challenged, but there is hope in here, and there has been a significant improvement from last year in this part of the business, and the outcomes for our residents have improved in this part of, and I think it just needs to be, I'm reinforcing the point that Joe made, there is something that we need to hold on to there as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, David. Good point. Trevor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick one. I think more looking forward, because there is some good stuff in here, but I guess my question is, as we go forward, there'll be even less and less spare money. Yeah. Winter is not a surprise. It does tend to happen. So are we happy that we are integrating some of this stuff more formally into budgeting and commissioning in order to effectively build a lot of this stuff in as business as usual, rather than necessarily be a little bit more reactive mode?
Joe, do you want to pick up?
Definitely. So we've made a commitment as part of as we're doing this, is that it needs to look very different, because I think the bit we're not complacent. We still know we're getting it wrong for patients. So as part of how we get through this next few weeks and months is part of the planning for next winter. And obviously we know we have the next challenge because we have Easter. So it's how we plan those seasonal variations.
But just in terms of Trevor's question, I think was one around strategic commissioning, because it's not just about the here and now, it's then the long-term sustainability element thereafter, isn't it? It's the key question. So whilst this is a plan which is around winter and this winter and getting through this winter, and it is getting through this winter, isn't it? There is the bigger prize, which is around how do we create a more sustainable system for primary care, for community services, that therefore then continues to support the wider system. So this, it's part of the 10-year plan and the longer-term plan, and our medium-term plan is to say, what do we learn from this in terms of those strategic commissioning levers that helps to make sure that we've got the capacity in the right place in the longer term.
Okay, thanks, Patricia. Simon.
So trying to pull all of that together, a really helpful conversation. I think a really important point, which is currently we recognise and acknowledge patients are not experiencing the care all of the times that we would want them to, and we own that and recognise that as a senior team sitting around this table. But within that, there are some elements, as David highlighted, where there are improvements being demonstrated, improvements compared with where we were last year, but clearly there is a significant amount more for us to do, and we are committed to doing that work. I think the improvement plan that's been set out is the right work, because whichever and whoever looks at that, whether it be NHS England, external review of that, all comes back and say you're in the right areas, you've got the right focus, keep with the plan that we're doing. Nitty, I'm going to push back, but happy to pick up outside with you. I think this is about getting the right information to the right committee, and the UEC committee is the right place for that data to be reviewed. But I will reach out and say you're more than welcome to come to the UEC committee and join another committee and look at that data in detail. So pick that up. I think the action around the dynamic risk assessment, reading across into the information that comes through from general practice, I think is a really helpful one. We'll do that. I think we also just need to recognise, we can talk about a lot about where our strategic commissioning intentions are. The financial challenge that we're operating in this year it is significant. Next year is even tougher. So absolutely, mainstreaming this work now is the right thing to do, because it's got to be within the resources that we've got available, because what we've got available this year is going to be less next year when we do that. And I think the conversation between Meredith and Deborah in terms of what does support look like when we get to the primary care paper later as well is an important one that we need to pick up and do more work in to make sure that we get that in the right place and we understand that properly, so that we can put the right place, the right support in. And then the comms piece, I know Harriet sitting there who's been instrumental in terms of the Think Which campaign from that Lynn talked about. We can absolutely look at that and pick and make sure we push that really hard with support of colleagues over the coming weeks.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of points. I think we need to raise the profile of the work in primary care and social care in all of this. And one thought I had was, because UEC is not going to go away, we need to mainstream it and understand what's happening, is that for our next board in January, we actually turned this item into more of a focus on primary and social care, data supported. I think it helps us understand more about what's happening in those areas. We tend to be quite acute focused in all of this. So that's just a point to be considered for the January meeting, as whether we could have a bit more data around the points that Nitty's raised around this for us to understand more. I think the second point is that it's quite difficult, particularly for non-execs, to understand the data, and I would ask the ICB executive to actually point us in the direction of the data sources. So if nothing else, we may not see it here, we can still have a look at it. And I think that's an important point as well. If there is a data library we could have access to, that would be very helpful. Okay, so well done everyone. It's only November, but I think that the message is coming through that we are on the right track. And I think the message from the ICB to all our colleagues across primary care, social services, voluntary sector, people at home and the acutes is that we are very grateful for your hard efforts to keep people in the right place in a safe environment. We know it's going to get tougher as the winter goes on, but I think we're in a far better position this year than we were last year. Thank you. Moving on then to the next item, which is the system EDI update. Vanessa.
Thank you, Chair. So the paper broadly reflects the actions that were agreed at June's board and provides an update to those. It supports our responsibilities as a board in this area where we're trying to put in some really strategic development. Key updates particularly are around the board development, which dates are now being agreed, and that will be supported by NHS Confederation and a company called 90 Days, and the board will be set an improvement to do, which is to be informed. The other key point of update is the output of a system away day, and you've got the brief output there in 2.3, which I'd appreciate a brief discussion on, so that we can use that in order to help shape these into strategic objectives for the system, and NHS Confederation's expert team are supporting that so that we get it right first time, and we can work with partners to do that. In the meantime, there's a considerable amount of work going on in partner organisations across the system. That has not stopped in any way. There is a steering group who helped with the away day, contributed to it, as well as exec and operational leads. The steering group meets again in January. Unfortunately, one of them was cancelled, but we're really pushing ahead for that January one. Because it's really important that we start to action plan on the strategic objectives. Some of it will be sharing information, and I've had helpful conversations with execs from other organisations about pieces of work which would be even better if they were shared and enhanced across system partners. So papers there as read, I won't dwell on it anymore, but I would value that discussion on those key issues and themes from the away day. Thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa. Very important area. Any points or comments colleagues wish to make?
It's an excellent away day we had that you organised. System partners were fully involved, so I'm really glad that I came. I hope we get some action from it. Thank you, Vanessa.
It was timely. It was at Telford College as well for the away day, so it all ties in well to today's agenda.
Thank you. Patricia.
Yeah, I think a really good piece of work, and appreciate the kind of away day and some of the key objectives and actions that are falling out of that. Just one area I think which is also worthy of focus, which is in the paper, and that is around raising public awareness and public engagement. Post riots this year, which I think we all found incredibly difficult to understand and grasp, and are still processing, I think, as a nation. There is an awful lot still that we need to do with local communities around managing and supporting EDI, as well as us as organisations. So I think that is a really important point as well that we need to include include within this.
And Patricia, you've actually hit the nail on the head there when we think about the perceptions paper that we had earlier in the year that we presented in June as well. It ties in with that, and actually that is top of the list at the moment for the board development day subject, because I think we can all be clear stakeholders in that.
Thank you.
Just one point, and again, nobody would disagree with the issues, themes that came out. Again, just learning from similar in the people arena is how you prioritise this, because there's so much there, isn't there? And I don't disagree with anything. It's really difficult when you start to try and drill down prioritising. But I think if there's a strategy that sets out all of that, is that achievable? It's trying to, isn't it? Where are the key areas that are going to make the biggest difference? So I'm sure you already know that, Vanessa.
Yeah, it's good to raise it. Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you. Lynn.
I was part of the away day, so thank you for inviting me. And it was really useful to be part of those conversations. As an ex-teacher, as I observe our system, I also note that I've been on quite a lot of interview panels into our system. And what I've taken away from those is that some of the people who look best on paper don't perform well in interview, and therefore they don't get the job. And I think there's work to be done with those people. They've expressed an interest in our system. We know that they can do it, but they just don't perform well in an interview. And I think there is something about training people to help them with that career advancement that is a missed opportunity in the ICS.
Okay, thank you. Very good point.
So I just want to pick on that. Look, really good work that's taking place. Important that we progress with it, get the development session in. I just want to pick up on Lynn's point. You know, we're having a conversation certainly in the ICB around moving to values-based recruitment, and actually just starting to say, should we just share the questions in advance so that it's not a memory test? It's actually a what can you prepare and think about and come in advance to talk about what you bring into that space. And for us, your point is not just the people external to the system that then don't make it, but there's a number of people with strong aspirations and ambition in the system that are expressing interest in some of this, and we need to be working with those as well. So we're in that conversation then because of that point exactly.
Thank you. Any further points? Okay, so the paper has our full support and agreement, and we look forward to the next steps. Thank you. Next item is EPRR update. Gareth, are you leading on this?
I am, Roger.
Okay.
For anyone, I recognise this is a very complex paper, and the supporting appendices, as introduced by Simon at the front end of the meeting. What I'm proposed to do is just to steer the board through the key points from the cover paper, with some asks of the board that we have. For anyone unfamiliar, emergency preparedness, resilience and response, the NHS and therefore we as an ICB need to build a plan for and respond to a pretty wide range of incidents and emergencies which could affect health or patient care. This is underpinned by legislation including the Civil Contingencies Act as well as the healthcare related acts of Parliament. So we have an obligation to bring this to the board, and we're very happy to do that. We need to comply with a lot of guidance from national sources on this. We conduct an annual self-assessment of our compliance against core standards. These core standards and self-assessment requires an annual review. We are obliged to update our documents annually and seek board approval for the continuation of those documents as amended. So in this report, we're covering the self-assessment that we've made of our compliance. We have submitted, with supporting evidence, to NHS England's Midlands Region team, who have been very supportive of us and are broadly content with what we have submitted. That process is still ongoing at the moment. We have established an EPRR programme group to manage this process, and I'll elaborate on that shortly. And so we'll be inviting the board to approve the governance and reporting lines for that group, which is through the audit committee, who have seen a paper that resembles this one with the documents and appendices there. So I'll just firstly cover the role of the programme group, which we will use to drive the implementation, monitoring of the work programme, ensure that we've got the right levels of governance, assurance and risk assessment in place, and oversee the compliance with the core standard. The terms of reference for that group are included as one of the appendices. It's entirely consistent with groups elsewhere in the NHS. We've met once so far, and we're confident that can deliver the outputs that are required. Just turning to the documents that have been reviewed by that group, and seen by the Audit Committee at the 18th of September meeting. This is part of the compliance with our overall core standards, and the documents are listed in the main body of the paper, which I don't propose to go through. The core standards, which we've done an assessment of, we started this time last year having been judged to be non-compliant in accordance with these standards, and that is specifically 76% or less compliance. The thresholds are very high for the banding compliance, but nevertheless at 53% last year we were non-compliant. As a result of that, in January, Simon directed a review of what we were doing. That was led for us by NHS England in the Midlands region team, led through a report with a number of recommendations that we've been working through. I'm pleased to report that we have made significant strides towards that, fulfilling the recommendations of that report. And now we judge ourselves to be 78% compliant against the core standards, which it gives us partial compliance, which is a significant stride from where we were before, and we fully anticipate improving on that in the next year, and we'll continue to work on it very hard. Our providers have also made significant improvements. There is some detail in the paper on the page marked number 10. Staff and Shropshire in particular have made very substantial improvements on where they were last year, which we're very pleased about, and the other providers are getting there as well. So much progress made. My ask of the board is to note the content of this report, accepting the fact that it is very heavy, very complex. I seek approval for the updated new document. They have been externally validated by NHS England and approved. They have also been reviewed extensively by the programme group and seen by the audit committee. I also seek approval for the EPRR programme group and the governance arrangement for that to be overseen by the audit committee. And also I invite the board to note the self-assessed levels of compliance we've got of ICB and also of our providers, accepting the fact that we've got more work to do and we will keep working very hard to improve our compliance levels going forward.
Okay.
That's all I'd like to cover, Roger.
Okay, thank you very much, Gareth, and thank you to all for their commitment and hard work into this exercise. It's been a tough journey, but I think we've made a lot of progress since 2023, so thanks to everyone involved. Any questions or points to raise from anybody? Martin?
I suppose one of what, just to give assurance really, obviously I sit here, Robert Jones, and see the figures, not particularly comfortable with those, so I'm going to take those away and just have a look and better understand that from our trust perspective.
Okay, thank you, that'd be very welcome. Okay, Patricia. Yeah.
And on part of that is some of it is around how we share as organisations. The one thing I'm really cognizant of is that, 18 months ago, we weren't in a great place as Shropcom. We've got somebody who's very capable, but it isn't just one person. It's how you embed that leadership and building leadership and understanding of EPPR across the system. But if you look at EPPR officers across the piece, they are as rare as hen's teeth. And this is something that we should be doing collectively as a system in terms of building that resilience, which will subsequently improve compliance across the piece.
Okay, thank you. Good point. Okay, so we are happy to approve the recommendations in the report, the updated guidance and the governance arrangements. Thank you, Gareth. Moving now on to intensive and assertive community mental health care action plan. Claire.
Thank you, and I'm going to hand straight over to Gemma and colleagues who have put a lot of hard work into getting this pulled together. So, Gemma, if you'd like to lead us into the paper.
Thanks, Claire.
Okay, Gemma, you have the floor.
Thank you. So, just bringing the paper here today, Jackie has led on this from an ICB perspective, working very closely with Anne, so they will pick up any of the technical or clinical details from questions. So in summary, we were asked by NHS England back in September to submit a rapid review of mental health services following the Nottinghamshire CQC review, following the Valdo-Calacane triple homicide. So within that return, there were a number of key lines of inquiry that were asked of us in terms of policies, services, DNA policies, service user engagement, and planning of care, all of which are detailed within the paper. And on the back of that, there was also a request for an action plan to be prepared, which identified any gaps and also mitigations, but also things that we needed to look at slightly differently. That was submitted at the end of September, and following on from that, there was a further request from NHS England in terms of a submission around what funding would be required to close any of the identified gaps or risks within the action plan. So again, a further submission was made with some estimated costs a number of weeks ago. We're bringing it here today just for information and for the board to note the outputs of that exercise, and also to note the current position around ensuring that demonstrating that the review's been completed, the action plan is in place, and that NHS England are currently in the process of collating all of the trends from all of the submissions currently made. And there will be a webinar on the 10th of December where that will be shared, and also STW will be compared with a number of our anonymised regional colleagues in terms of what our risks and gaps are compared to other areas. There's also a task and finish oversight group that's in place across Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin. That's across both mental health, MPUFT, the ICB, and also both local authorities recognise the roles of the social workers, particularly around the forensic cohort of patients. And then there's also a second phase that NHS England are planning, which is outlined within the paper, which is around developing guidance with external partners around mental health services to specify what good should look like. So the paper's been brought to note the content of the report, to note the progress that's been made so far, to note that there is a task and finish group that is meeting regularly to monitor this action plan, and also to ensure that we bring back any stage 2 requirements. And NHS England have asked for specific assurance that this is discussed and presented in our public board.
Thank you, Janet. This is a hugely important area. Dreadful events last June in Nottingham. Do you have any views, Anne, on this?
I think we already knew after community mental health transformation that we didn't have sufficient data to easily be able to see the level of risk and complexity on individual clinicians' caseloads. So we already knew that, and this has just pushed it right up to the agenda in our organisation, which I'm really pleased about. But it's also meant I was really cognizant when you were talking about the shift from analogue to digital, because what we wanted was a digital solution. We've had to do an analogue piece of work, but it is completed. We do know where people are within our organisation. We don't know where they are outside our organisation, so that's some of the work that we've been doing, both with our forensic colleagues, with the VCSE, to say if you see people that meet this picture, this criteria, let us know. We want to know about those people.
And how's your process of engagement with the other agencies going, like general practice and social care?
Yes, well, I think similar communication needs to happen. So this is part of, I think, bringing it here so everyone's cognizant of the work that's been undertaken.
Okay.
I was about to bring up the same thing from the other side. There's a really difficult balance to achieve here with people with significant mental illness where they don't have insight, and you have to recognise their rights to not to engage with treatment unless they reach the point where they become a risk to themselves or others. And that can be really difficult to manage in the community, certainly from a general practice point of view, and for their families and loved ones and people around them. because it's really difficult when you see somebody who is clearly unwell, doesn't have insight, doesn't yet meet that threshold whereby they can have a mental health act assessment or be detained. And I think there is a gap there where it would be helpful to be able to have a conversation, to maybe make sure that everybody in the system, both in mental health services and community services and general practice, perhaps are aware that there is a situation evolving, that we can't intervene yet because of the rights of that individual, but so that we can move quickly if things deteriorate, because sometimes that's where it gets tricky. There's a kind of, we can't do anything, we don't kind of want to know about it until you cross that threshold, and then suddenly everybody has to plan in quickly. Something about planning and being prepared would be really helpful there, I think. It's not an easy thing to do. And the only other thing I would observe is you mentioned here about things about not discharging people because they don't engage and so on, which I think is really important. The other challenge sometimes that can be is actually referring people in the first place, and I suspect there's a little bit of work to do. We do still sometimes see those letters, this patient was referred in, they didn't respond to a letter or a telephone call, therefore we have discharged them. And that this is a really vulnerable group who may well not engage with straightforward bureaucratic methods of contact, and perhaps we need to think around that a little bit more.
Thank you. It's an area of concern. Nitty.
Just quickly on that, are you comfortable that you have enough staff to deal with this? Because I know that mental health services are the worst staffed out of all the NHS services, having been in another trust and on board. It's really tough, particularly in that kind of borderline area between child and adolescent, moving on to adulthood. There's a big gap there.
There is, and recruitment is difficult for people working with children and adolescents. Am I assured we have enough staff? I think that's a really difficult question to answer, and I'm aware that I think it's called SR2. They're talking about 2 years away for a response to the bids that we've gone in, costings we've submitted. It's not really a bid, they requested it. And that would make such a difference if assertive outreach was intensive involvement was properly funded, and it would make such a difference to clinicians who are carrying mixed caseloads because we don't have a specialist team, and are going to be being asked, are you comfortable that you haven't seen this person for this long? You know, and it points to capacity and demand, doesn't it? Because we've got lots of people coming through the front door who don't meet this criteria, who we also want to serve. So,
and lots of locum staff as well, I gather, in the service.
Yep.
So it's a very difficult one to get comfort with, I think, Roger, and I think it's important that we keep on top of this, because we're never going to be able to meet everything if the staffing situation isn't sorted here.
Thank you.
And it's not just about money, right? It's
No,
about people
no.
wanting to work in the
People
service.
wanting to work, yeah.
Thanks, Nitty. David.
Thank you, Chair. I guess it's reinforcing the point on the bottom of page 75 about assurance. It quotes, a key issue is that MPFT cannot identify the cohort of patients due to the lack of dedicated service provision. Clearly, from a board perspective, that is of concern, from an assurance perspective as well. But clearly, is there a role? There is a role for the wider community in this, and clearly, I guess using the Make Every Contact Count, both from the perspective of local government and NHS providers. Can we do more? Do professionals know who to contact and how to escalate things, both in terms of local government and in the NHS? And you know, that line in that report about assurance is a bit of a worry, and I think we've got to put more focus on this. It goes to Deborah's point as well in terms of how we make contact with residents. There'll be different ways and means that we need to adopt here from the NHS providers, and also perhaps from local government as well. There's more we can do, and there's more we must do in this space.
Lynn.
I was just going to again bring in the public experience from the 2 engagement events last week. For me, when I was talking earlier about pressures moving to other parts of the system, mental health is a huge part of this, because those people who I've met who may be waiting for something, usually a test result or something, they were crying out for mental health support. and I did a lot of signposting on both of those days, so I can see that the pressure moving towards those services is huge across our system.
Yeah, so really helpful conversation. A couple of bits from me. So firstly, I think it's really important that if any board member hasn't read the CQC report into the Nottingham situation, then please take the time to do that. It's on each and every one of us as a board member to be cited on that, because that then underpins why we're having this conversation today and what plays out in that space. I think the second bit is it's really important that the board sees the comprehensive and very honest assessment, both in terms of where there is assurance and where there isn't assurance, but what sits behind that then is our responsibility and provider board's responsibility to make sure then we've got the governance right, we've got the partnership working right, and we've got the monitoring systems in place. That's the board's responsibility to make sure that we've got that oversight, which is what Deborah's talked about, what David's talked about, and what others have talked about. So I think that this needs to go on the forward plan, Chair, in terms of an update that comes back against both stage 2, but also the work that's in place on this now, and we use our committee structure to make sure that we are getting that through in the right in the right process, so that there is a clear visibility and clear focus on the delivery of the action plan that sits behind this.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for all your input. A lot of work to be done on this. It's clearly a very high-risk area that we face. It requires lots of cooperation and information sharing right across the piece. And as a board, we will obviously, as Simon said, get the assurance process coming through our committees. But I think also, when ready, Gemma and colleagues, come back to the board with an update report. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Are people okay to carry on working through? You don't want to go for a run or go and... Okay then. I'm just conscious of your back, so you want to shuffle around and please do so. Next item is the System Integrated Improvement Plan. Claire.
Thank you, and in a moment I'm going to hand over to Julie Garside, who will take us through the paper. But before I do, I just wanted to register my thanks to colleagues in our provider organisations for their support and help in developing the framework that you've got here, and also just a very special mention and thank you to Julie, because she won't do it for herself, who has coordinated this piece of work, not just between us internally as a system, but also through the communications with NHS England to really make sure that we get this right, because it's so important that we do. But I'll hand over to Julie and she can take us through the key points.
Thanks, Julie? Yep.
Oh, I am now suitably embarrassed. In terms of this, obviously the board members will be aware of the position of our system in terms of the National Oversight Framework and being in NOV 4, and our main provider, Shrewsbury Telford Hospitals, also being in NOV 4. It's important that we therefore have an integrated improvement plan that demonstrates our ability to get out of that NOV 4, to demonstrate our improvement against the exit criteria that are set by NHS England and the 5 criteria listed in the paper. Against each of those 5 criteria, we had key deliverables that we have to achieve. They've all been agreed with the regional NHS England and also the national RSP team. Those within the plan then, we have got, the plan is made up of 15, believe it or not, tabs within the spreadsheet. Each of those exit criteria has 3 elements to it. One is the summary of that exit criteria and what those key deliverables are. The second tab for each one is then what are those key actions, timescales and owners. And the third tab reflects the risks associated with the delivery of those actions and the achievement of those exit criteria. We also have to, following discussion at the board today, we will also be required to take it through for approval to NHS England, and in the paper we were expecting that to be part of the system delivery meeting on Friday the 19th. I need to inform colleagues that has been postponed now and will now take place on Friday the 13th of December. The paper also outlines the governance that we will go through to ensure oversight of delivery and progress against this plan. And again, we appreciate the complexity of this, but I've tried to weave in, and you'll see from the table within the plan, we're using existing governance structures in terms of our provider colleagues, but also the ICB to oversee that. And we will have dedicated capacity within the Programme Management Office that will oversee the delivery of the individual actions, and we also have capacity within the planning performance and BI team to be tracking the impact, because it's important, as well as giving evidence that we've done what we said we would do, it's the impact of those actions to make and change those metrics, particularly in the area of our workforce, our UEC, our emergency care, and of course our financial position. I would like to echo Claire's thanks from our provider colleagues. As I said, it's really important, and I think one of the things that's really different this time is the support and the detail that our provider colleagues have gone through with us in terms of understanding those exit criteria, what's required to deliver those key deliverables, and also to provide those supporting actions to do so. So my thanks to colleagues, and also we'll continue to work with them in terms of evidence and delivery. The expectation is that overall oversight of the plan will be through this board, and the assurance of that delivery will be through the Quality and Performance Committee. The one thing we do still need to finalise with NHS England is their process of how we will submit and review the evidence of our delivery and the impact of our improvement plan. We hope we will do that at the service delivery meeting on the 13th. So I'm asking the boards to approve the integrated improvement plan, which is Appendix 2, to also approve the governance and the oversight arrangements of the plan, and to note the board level risk summary that's Appendix 3 within the document. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Very good. Any further points? Andrew.
Yes, thank you. I'll probably start by saying I strongly support having a system integrated improvement plan. I've had one in previous roles to good effect, including getting just out of double special measures in 5 years. So I've come at it as a fan. I suppose that as a relative newbie to the system, my goodness, we've got a lot of plans. I think it's going to be important that there might be some plans that we no longer have because this one's more important. So I'm certainly looking in my two trusts to see where's the overlap and duplication, so that we've got proper focus on the stuff that really does matter. I suppose, having said that, we've got a lot of plans. We've also now got a plan that's got a lot in it. Yeah, I've never seen quite so many tabs in my life. I think we do need to be clear what are the top draw priorities that we really do have to deliver. And I know one of the answers would be, well, you've got to deliver a lot. Yeah, but I think there will be some that are more important than others. And as ever, writing is the easy bit, isn't it? Might not seem it at the time, but it's the delivery where you earn the impact and the sort of responsibility. I think the interdependencies between us all is going to be really important in this. And I always have a bit of a concern when individual organisations write bits and then you join them up, whether you've ended up with a Frankenstein plan or not. So I know you won't have done that. It's always a worry in my mind. And on that delivery point, I think a key bit would be, how do we hold each other to account for delivery? We can't just have one bit of us doing okay and somebody else doesn't. So I think we're all tied on the same rope, the same cliff on this one. If one of us falls off, we're probably heavy enough to get the rest of us with us. The final point is, I think we really have to see this as our plan, not something NHS England might want to trawl all over. By all means, let's let our colleagues trawl all over it and get their assurance from our assurance, rather than setting up a duplicate set of governance that takes a whole load of committees and people's attendance. And yeah, just solely because I always believe if a board signs up to a plan, it's taking responsibility and capability for delivering it. And if we don't believe we can deliver it, we shouldn't write it, we shouldn't sign it off. So, take that as my own trust, that's the approach. And that probably goes back to there's an awful lot in this. Are we really saying we're going to do all of those?
And I think what is different about this, you see, you're absolutely right that there are lots of plans. What this is all of those brought together. So the urgent and emergency care element of this plan is absolutely our UEC improvement plan. And it's all of those contributing factors from all system partners to ensure that delivery. So whilst, yes, you're absolutely right, it is a beast, it's brought together the plans that were already there. It is not over and above those, it's consolidating them into one space. Likewise, the finance plans, again, we know there's been a number of actions there. That's only, again, bringing it all into one place and ensuring it. I really welcome the support in terms of the board and the delivery, and I think you're absolutely right. We are all tied together on this, and as and I feel as too in my planning hat, as well as obviously doing this through my performance hat, we no longer plan or deliver performance as individuals. We live and die by our performance together. And I think, as I said, I genuinely think the support that we've had from provider colleagues and how they've scrutinised the plans, taking them through their own boards, and that gives me confidence and assurance that this time it is different, that it isn't, it is our plan. I think the one thing we unfortunately do have to do because of the oversight framework, we still do have to provide the evidence to NHS England for them to effectively, ultimately report up to the top of the shop and request our exit. Again, what I would say, lessons learned from last time, I've been absolutely clear as part of this, the plan and the drawing up and the involvement of NHS England as we brought this plan together, has been to specify what good looks like. Because in the past, we have done what we thought was expected of us and provided that evidence only for more to be expected. And I think this time we wanted that clarification up front, so it was clear both to all the system partners, but also it was in there in writing from NHS England as to what that evidence needed to be. So there's no, there'll always be some ambiguity, but we're trying to minimise that again to avoid duplication and to make sure that we're focusing on the things that will get us out of NOF4.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Julie?
It may be that there's just no need for it, but and I have tried to look at this and read bits of it, but there's not a huge mention of primary care. And I know primary care probably doesn't automatically fit into the requirements to exit the performance framework, but obviously some of the plans and mitigations that are in there will impact upon primary care and some of the way services are delivered.
Okay.
Yes, I think that's true, particularly in urgent and emergency care, but I think that's how we link that through there to make sure that that is linked, and those links are made there in terms of with our provider colleagues, but including our primary care and our community services.
Okay. Any final points? Meredith.
Thank you. I was very struck by Andrew's references to horror and indeed terror. I'm just thinking of being the chair of the Quality and Performance Committee. I wasn't gleeful at this coming our way, but it did just make me think. Quite often we have reports about what's happening in the system that will be presented by Vanessa or Julie from the ICB, rather than those who are directly responsible for the actions and decisions that have the effect. So Julie, I was just wondering if we can have an arrangement that makes sure that the reporting of this is reported by those who are responsible for its success, not just a kind of a spokesperson or figurehead person.
Yeah, happy to take that away and work that through. Meredith, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any final questions? Andrew.
Sorry, I'll shut up. I suppose in my mind there's a real mindset bit to the plan. I don't see it first level as how do we get out of NOF4. I see it as how do we do a decent job with the accountabilities that we've got. By doing our jobs properly and well and better, we will move up whatever outcome framework we've got. But I'd be disappointed if we pitched it as if we do this we'll get out of NOF4, because that isn't the game we're in. It's a fight product.
It is.
Okay. I mean, picking up that point, do you feel, Julie, that the emphasis is right as opposed to just getting out from not 4 to not 3 is what this is about, or is the messaging right across the organisation?
Again, because of the individual plans that are in there, I mean, we have to appreciate the position that we're in and the importance of our regulators and the scrutiny that we are under. However, again, all of the plans that are in here, in particular our workforce plans, our urgent and emergency care plans that are within here, are all about improving the care for our patients and delivering our statutory duties in the way that we know we all want to do. And for all sorts of reasons, we're not doing at the moment, and by taking these actions, that's going to deliver that improvement.
Just to add, Chair, I think Julie's spot on, and Andrew's point is really helpful. We have to be cognizant of both lenses of this, don't we? So the starting point for us in the system will be, how do we improve things for patients and residents? The impact of delivering that, which is the plans in these areas, will be that NHS England's lens on this will enable us to move through the NOF rating system and come out of 4 and progress through that. So there are 2 lenses. We need to be cognizant of both because that's the board's responsibility, but our prime focus in terms of delivery is about how do we improve things for patients and residents. The other lens then gets delivered as a result of that.
Thank you. Okay.
Just one final point on that, and I absolutely agree. There is the position that we're in, and we are regulated, and therefore have to feed that regulator with provide assurance. But there's something here about we can take control about not turning this into a bureaucratic exercise. And huge admiration for Julie in trying to pull this beast together, because there is an expectation that we've filled in more spreadsheets and phartograms over the last 6 to 7 weeks than you can shake a jolly hockey stick in, whilst at the same time trying to manage operational positions in all organisations and a winter that came upon us a few weeks ago. We're tying up the same kind of people, and we've got to say to ourselves, in service of what? And if it isn't in service of improving quality and safety for people and residents, and turning the dial on the finances as well as reducing health inequalities, then why are we doing it? I know we've got to. It's a bit like paying your taxes. I don't want to, but we have to. But let's do it in a way that's meaningful in terms of what we're trying to achieve and the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, and how we create that holding to account, and the performance framework is going to be really crucial in making sure that we're not just feeding the beast and doing things differently, because an integrated plan should be about how we do things together differently.
Okay, thank you all. Very good comments. Just to pull it together then, I think there is clear support for the plan from the board. There is a question mark about we can't do everything at the same time, so it's a prioritisation process within that. And I think the final point is this is not a bureaucratic exercise. This should be an exercise that actually improves patient care and the services that we provide. So thinking that one through, please go away and think how that evidence-based change can be articulated. So it's not just we held a meeting or we had a project update. Let's get some real evidence that affects our population and patients about how things are changing. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Metrics in there, but we'll go back over those and focus those, because I think that's the important bit. And I said it isn't just about demonstrating that we've done what we said we would do. It had the impact that we need it to have, otherwise we won't have done the right things.
Okay, great stuff. Good, we wish you luck. Thanks, Julie. Moving now on to the integrated performance report. Claire.
Thank you, and I will take this one. What I'll do is I'll talk through some of the highlights and headlines from the paper, and then perhaps invite colleagues, and thinking Jo and Stacey in particular, if there's any comments they want to make. So in terms of some of the positive highlights that I wanted to flag, first of all, I won't repeat some of what Joe, you've already said around urgent and emergency care. I know we're set in a context of some very difficult days at the moment, but as you highlighted, we are seeing some improvements and sustained improvements that we need to continue to build on. From a cancer perspective, we're seeing our backlog numbers for over 62 days coming down and certainly improving in line with our recovery trajectories, and indeed faster diagnosis standards are slightly ahead of recovery trajectory, which is promising. For mental health, we can see in our metrics that our talking therapies are performing above target, and our waiting times from referral to starting treatment within 18 weeks is showing continued improvement, which is absolutely fabulous. We have signed off an improvement plan for dementia diagnosis rates at the Commissioning Working Group in November, which will help us to push harder in that area in particular. And NHS England have offered support to help us increase that rate of improvement, so we'll be meeting them very shortly in December to support with that, which is good. Highlighting for quality, we can see continued improvement in areas of our maternity metrics. Just a flag, smoking during pregnancy and postpartum hemorrhage, so I think that's really great news for families and mothers there. And from a workforce perspective, we've spoken previously around keeping our agency spend low and consistently low. We're still performing below the cap that we've got. Our absence rates are on plan. Our staff turnover rates are there or thereabouts. And actually we can see the benefit of the improved scrutiny through our people and workforce committees and subgroups, and we're starting to see really sustained impact in terms of our workforce numbers, which is absolutely fabulous. From a finance perspective, we're still finding real challenges. Finance is that product of what's happening on the ground, so it's no surprise that we're seeing that we're still off plan at month 7. We reported a £27.6 million deficit, which is 11.7 million adverse to plan. That's predominantly driven through SAF, but we are experiencing pressures and challenges across each of the providers and the ICB. We have a collective risk in the region of about £30 million, that risk of hitting our forecast outturn, and we are taking both individual and collective action at the moment to minimise that and reduce it as far as possible. Just to note here as well that we've been asked to provide additional assurances around our capital expenditure at month 8. The region and indeed the national team are asking for assurances about our expenditure on capital, because I think we're not alone insofar as there has been some slippage year to date. It's a general pattern that we see in terms of getting projects off the ground and also sometimes having access to funding authorised, but through speaking to the docs, I know that we have clear plans in terms of how we will be consuming that money by the end of the year. So we're being asked as individual boards and as the ICB to sign off those forecast plans, so we're just working to get the relevant mechanisms in place to be able to take those assurances and make the sign off. So that was just to note. As you'll appreciate from the conversations that we've been having today, we do still have some areas of concern. Just to highlight some of those, primary care, you'll have seen certainly in some of the press, but through previous reports that we've had, we have still got collective action happening through general practice. We're seeing minimal impact on urgent care at the moment in this system, but we are now starting to see some effect on our ability to deliver some of the planned savings we'd got around medication switches and medicines management. Our elective long waits still remain a concern in terms of variation from the plan that we originally set, and for diagnostics too. Some deterioration in diagnostics is due to clearance of backlog, but we still need to work hard on our delivery plans. And certainly once I've summarised that the electives and diagnostics might be something that Stacey and Joe want to comment on. Just finally, in terms of other areas of note, we've already talked about urgent emergency care, so I won't dwell on that. Workforce, whilst we can still see some great progress, we know we've got more work to do around the cost of bank staff at the moment, which is still above plan. We do have to take that in the round though, so we always sort of advise exercising caution, because actually bank is still a kind of cheaper alternative as it is to agency staff. They also tend to be staff that know our hospitals well. It also means that we're using that opportunity to manage some of our substantive posts as well. So just to put that note of caution. And then finally, I just wanted to mention community long waits. We are now reporting those weekly. Because we are cognizant that we have some long waits in our community services. We're monitoring plans to reduce them through our monthly contract review meetings with the Community Trust, and we've also secured some regional funding to help with some validation to really help improve the quality of our reporting, and so that we can focus on the true long waits rather than the entirety of the picture. So hopefully that gives a snapshot across the breadth of the metrics that we've got, but certainly happy to pick up any questions, or if Joe and Stacey want to comment on anything in particular.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Stacey.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Claire. Just opportunity really just to touch on Robert Jones' petition from a long waiting perspective. So when we're talking long waits, we're talking sort of the next milestone as part of the plan, which was to eradicate patients waiting over 65 weeks. Should have been end of September. As a trust, we were on track to deliver that, and this is by no means defensive or an excuse. We had a long-standing arrangement with an in-source provider, the Oswestry Orthopaedic LLP. That contract ceased in the summer. Contract that was delivering around 25 to 30% of the capacity at Robert Jones. Some of that was around framework compliance, hence that contract ceased. And to switch that off and switch on an alternative delivery model, which is the work as an organisation we're doing, unfortunately, is taking longer than anticipated. However, the position today compared to how it was a few weeks ago, revised trajectory of 390 patients end of November. We are set, I think we're already achieving that. I think we're around 300 today, so certainly back on track. And that's through a series of additional group and control, an activity recovery committee that we've put internally, exec-led PTL meetings with strengthened clinical leadership, some of our systems and processes, as well as the support from NHS England, GERF, from a mutual aid perspective. So certainly where we are today compared to where we were a few weeks ago. December, I think we started off 2 weeks ago with 703 patients in the December cohort. As of today, that's down to 245. So I think that shows the work that's happening. We still have a hotspot in spinal deformity, which NHS England as well are supporting with. But certainly, am I sitting here today far more confident around the revised 22nd of December. Still a little bit of risk, but certainly a far more confident position on delivering that.
Thank you, Stacey. Joe?
Thank you, Chair. So I think at the last meeting I've said around, actually, although we've talked a lot about UEC in South, we needed to address the balance in terms of elective and the diagnostic weight. So in terms of, I guess first of all, they aren't numbers to us, the patients. So we know that in terms of the elective waiting list, these are people's lives that are either on hold or that we're disrupting in terms of people may be struggling to get back to work, but also are presenting in the urgent and emergency care pathway. So it is as an important pathway to us, and they are constitutional standards which we need to deliver. So for 65 weeks, the Trust currently has, probably for November, 286, which is more than we want. There are two key specialties that we are working outside of our system that we need to address. One is ENT and the other is head and neck, which is a challenging specialty for many across the Midlands. We also, at the last board, talked about diagnostic recovery plans, and I mentioned earlier there's a meeting with our GP colleagues in December, but we have got a recovery plan that's in place. So for MRI, we will have in mid-December, we'll have a mobile van that will become operational. We think it'll probably take us about 15 weeks to clear that backlog. A diagnostic is only as good as its reporting, so at the same time what we're working on is the turnaround time for that, and that would be around 2 to 3 weeks from appointment to report. In terms of CT, we've got a recovery plan that's in place. That started mid-October. We've got 300 additional scans that are being outsourced a week. We've already started to see some improvements in that, especially for patients on an oncology staging monitoring pathway. So those have reduced from 13 weeks down to 4, and we are hopeful that by the 16th of December that we should have got that down from 2 weeks for all urgent scans. And we're anticipating that the full backlog for urgent and routine reporting should be cleared by around about the 20th of January. So there's a lot of oversight on this. It is as important as UEC, and clearly we will continue to monitor progress at SAS and through our board.
Thanks, Jo. Very helpful. Julian.
That sounds very positive from Stacey and Jo, and that's really positive news that the weights are coming down and there's a plan to address that. I suppose the one bit that I raised, and obviously it was an uncomfortable discussion at the last meeting, it was about really the assessment of the harm that's happened to patients on the pathway, and also the communication of the long wait. So whilst it's really positive to hear the news about the waits decreasing and the reporting time shortening, I think it's just to say what steps have been made to look at people on the waiting list. Particularly, I think some of it is around those waiting lists that go across multiple providers, say MSST, the orthopaedic MSK service with the waits for physiotherapy, and then also some of the waiting lists that bring a lot of work and a lot of which are impacting on patients' health around sort of cardiology and respiratory medicine and urology, and some of those long waits. And so it's more about, it's really good news to see that they're being addressed, but it's about the risk assessment and the harm assessment, and also the communication to patients.
Thank you. Good point, Jo.
The only point I wanted to make was I agree there needs to be a harm review process that's in place for all of those patients, and that's the work that we're going to do with the region and with the medical director at SAS.
And on Julian's point about communication with patients and GPs around what's happening, how's that going to be improved, you know?
Well, I guess from a risk perspective, I would expect that we would follow a normal process. There's a duty of candidate, there's a discussion with the patient. But yes, I think we need to understand the scale of the numbers on there, because this isn't just about reporting. This is patients that are waiting for first outpatients. I'd also suggest we need to then extend that to follow up. So I think one of the things that we have committed to is actually a elective recovery programme that picks up all the points that Julie is describing.
Okay, thank you. Stacey and then David.
Yeah, just to come in on Julian's point. So we have a harms review process and have done for a while within Robert Jones, but more touching on the point around communication. I think what's really helped us, and I don't know how we'd have done that, and I still think there's more work to do, but around digital, the My Recovery app, that we're not just using it for recovery, we're using it as an opportunity for waiting well. And really pleasing to say we've just put out a press release that we've now got 10,000 of our patients signed up to My Recovery. So we're using it, you know, not just around problems and outcomes following surgery, we're using it as much as signposting, things to do whilst you're waiting as well. So I don't know how we'd have done that without that digital platform.
Okay, thanks, Stacey. That's very positive. Lynn and then David.
Thank you. I suppose two things from me. I think you'd be surprised if I didn't mention digital inequality. I mean, I completely appreciate that there's some really useful tools out there, but there's also a lot of people who can't or won't use them, and it's about making sure that they've got the equal access to support and information. And the other thing I was going to say is, you know, again from my conversation with the public last week, I think it's about remembering the long-term impact on patients of those weights. Even when they've been seen, the people I spoke to certainly felt that they'd been traumatised by that weight and were still feeling traumatised. And I think it's about the impact on their confidence in the treatment that they then eventually have, and whether or not any delay is meant that it might impact their outcomes. So I think, for me, there's a massive mental health element of this as well, which I've touched on earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Very valid points. David.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. To the top of page 89 talks about the percentage of LDA having an annual health check. Performance is poor. So I'd ask the board, should we have a look at an improvement plan around this and be reassured on another day at another meeting, but target 75% of performance is really low.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make that point. And then my second point is page 92.1.7, and the access from children and young people to mental health services, again, is poor performance in this space. And again, should it be something we as a board ask to see improvement around, and what actions are going to be taken on both those subjects, really, Chair? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Vanessa?
just to come back on that, on the LDA health checks, so totally appreciate that the report looks negative, David, on SRO for LDA, and I've had recent conversations about this myself. It is looking better month on month, so as we get to closer months. The activity tends to be focused in Q4. That is how it has been historically, and it's not just in this system. That's how it is. I think there's some conversations to be had about really understanding why and making sure that the board's got awareness. Totally happy to bring a brief paper back to explain it, working with primary care colleagues. But just to let you know that we've exceeded that target last year. It was nearer to 80%. I think it was 78%. But I do acknowledge the national ambition of 75% isn't enough when we don't accept that as enough for our system residents that require this. So, but very happy to bring a paper back.
Okay, thank you. We need to move on, Nigel, and then Nitty.
I was just going to make a brief strategy point, if I may, because we were talking about diagnostics, as part of this, and colleagues around the board will know that one of the important components of building diagnostic capacity was our community diagnostic centre, and working really closely with David and team in Telford and Wrekin Council. We're having those same discussions again with NHS England. I know there's national discussions about it, but bearing in mind that CT and MRI, endoscopy probably rises in general 6, 7, 8, 9% year on year, and that's just the way, unfortunately, that we've got it across the UK. We're always looking at alternatives and alternative pathways, but building diagnostic capacity in this system and looking where and how we position that is something that we're actively looking at. We also talked, and just a couple of elements to that, we talked at this board in the board development session about rural access, so we're looking at how we link that in, and the broader health and equality parts as well. So it was just to assure the board that we're looking at that, but we're understanding the components underneath it.
Okay, thank you. Nitty, Deborah, you wanted to?
I was only going to repeat what Vanessa said about health checks happening in the
Just quickly on your point, Julian, around harm and your remark. The really good article in The Guardian today, I don't know if people read it. It's Bone on Bone Agony, the cruel reality of facing a 3-year waiting list for a new knee. I'd encourage everybody to read it. It's a mix for very good reading in terms of what patients actually suffer.
Okay, thank you. Right, that's my evening reading.
Can I just add one thing, just going back to Joe's point about harm reviews, particularly around cancer, is that we've got a quality lead in the ICB that's funded by Cancer Alliance, and they're helping SAP and supporting cancer harm reviews at the moment, while the Trust will appoint their lead cancer nurse who's into the appointment process, I understand that.
Okay, thank you. Any further points? No. Okay, so this is very much a salutary lesson to us all about the suffering in our community and the harm that this is causing. And we take this extremely seriously, and we must do our utmost to to mitigate this situation as soon as we can. I think there's just one point, and it goes into this point I made earlier about 25, 26, that we shouldn't just focus on the next few months. We need a long-term sustainable gearing up of all of this to address this demand, and we must take that forward in our commissioning intentions for next year, which we need to look at as soon as possible. Thank you. Right, we're moving on now to the delivery plan for the recovery of access to primary care. This is a snappy title, Laura, so where you go.
Thanks, Chair. So this paper essentially sets out, there was a 2-year programme proposed by the national team around primary care access recovery, known as the Snappy PCOP programme. This paper reports on our achievement against the first year of that programme. In the second year, helpfully, they've renamed it the SLAPE, not a terribly catchy acronym, but the system level access improvement plan. I think recognising that access to primary care needs a system approach. It cannot simply be considered the problem of general practice and primary care colleagues. And I think that's a really important step. So what the paper does then start to talk about our ambitions, our achievements so far this year, and then our ambitions towards the end of the second year of the programme. There are 4 main areas that the programme covers. So that's about empowering patients to use things like the NHS app, to be able to access care from other places, so self-referring into services without needing to wait for a GP appointment, using our Pharmacy First schemes that have been commissioned. The second bit is around implementing the modern general practice model, which essentially is all about using the capacity that we've got in a much smarter way. So getting away from that first come, first served, horrible 8 o'clock in the morning scrum for appointments, and actually collecting more information from our patients, giving them different ways to access us, but making sure that those portals for access are equitable. So you can't jump the queue just because you're digitally savvy, making sure that we've got that access for everybody, but that we collect information, we signpost people to the right person to deal with their problem, whether that be a GP, nurse practitioner, a pharmacist, or a first contact practitioner, physio practitioner, and that we're also supporting that telephone and that online journey, so you're not sitting there listening to, you are 21st in the queue. You can go about your daily life, your position in the queue is held, and you can get a call back when it's your turn to speak, or you can leave messages, you can contact us in various ways. It's about building capacity, making sure that we are recognising that our workforce is woefully under-resourced, that we've have lost lots of skilled GPs, and we continue to do so at a rate of knots, and that internationally there are really aggressive recruitment drives. So if I wanted to go and practice in Australia, I could start in 2 weeks, and they will facilitate that process through, and in many cases they will financially incentivise that, and that's the challenge that we're facing, to hold on to our GPs. It's also about cutting bureaucracy and recognising that actually there are lots of really low value activities that are pushed into general practice from various places. They need to happen, but you don't want your GP spending their time doing them, and they could definitely happen more efficiently elsewhere. So it's about recognising that and just seeing how we can redelegate those tasks. The paper sets out the 10 actions that we've been asked to undertake around those things. I just wanted to highlight a couple of good news stories for STW, because we absolutely do have challenges. We recognise that there's lots of anxiety and frustration in the general public about being able to access their general practices because they value them so much. They absolutely do. They're the foundation and they're the first port of call, and we recognise that there is real difficulty there at the moment. Likewise, we recognise that, as Deborah mentioned earlier, our practices are working at absolutely maximum capacity the majority of the time, and that there is very little slack in that system, very little more that they can give. And so we need to be supporting them to find better ways to be efficient and to meet that demand, whilst in the background growing that workforce. So the good news stories. So Pharmacy First. We were the first ICS to have 100% sign up to the Pharmacy First schemes. and we're consistently in the top 5 performers nationally for the clinical pathways that sit within Pharmacy First. We have been successful in recruiting workforce through the additional roles reimbursement schemes. So we've had an additional 375 headcount, so that's almost 300 extra whole-time equivalent staff at the end of March 2024 across 20 different skill mix roles, so offering different opportunities for people to consult with experts in their field. We've also tried to support the recent addition of GPs being recruited in through that ARRS budget. We've been working with our PCNs and we hope that our aim is that by the end of March 2025, all of our 9 PCNs will have recruited at least 1 GP through that scheme by the end of March 2025. The final good news bit is working with colleagues such as Julie and Deborah and others, as well as teams from SAF. We have and around the system, so we have representation from Shropcom, we have representation from our out-of-hours providers, we have representation from Robert James and Agnes Hunt, as well as general practice. We have signed off a primary care, secondary care interface consensus document, so we now have an agreement that says this is how we're going to support one another, working across that interface in service of those patients. But recognising that we all need to be working at the top of our licence and fulfilling our obligations to each other. I shouldn't be writing a cheque for your time if I haven't asked you, or if you haven't agreed that I'm allowed to write that cheque. It's taken a reasonable amount of time to come to that agreement, but we have signed it off. I think it's a really big step forward, and now we've done that, we can start to take the themes that sit within that and develop our task and finish groups to start to really drill down into how do we improve those stones in everybody's shoes. And we saw objective evidence of that. We had to do a reassessment. Our 2 acute providers had to do our reassessment against how well they thought they were doing in terms of delivering those interface asks. When we did the assessment in March, we scored 0 across the board. We've actually seen quite a significant improvement in those self-assessment scores when the self-assessment was undertaken in October, November time. So we are starting to see objective improvement as well, which is really, really positive. So I'll stop there, Chair, and invite any questions.
Thank you, Lorna. Very good. Any points GP College wish to raise? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think Lorna is absolutely right. There's a lot of green shoots for improvement that's already underway. But I think I just want to highlight one thing to the board about the potential impact from the autumn budget statement, about the potential issue about the hike in NI contribution, because that is going to be a massive problem for practices. We have 50 practices running the same estates, no different from 10 years ago. We're increasing capacity to max. We still have more work to be done about integration, just as what Meredith asked, what support do we need? I think from our last board development session, we've actually highlighted there's a lot of good things happening and we're communicating well, but we can do better. And also we need a better reciprocal understanding between UAC and GP to be able to have effectual mutual aid arrangements, because we don't have that at the moment. So we don't have that within general practice. We don't have that at a system level with general practice. So that's something we need to look at long term. So, and I think NHSC has put in a system level framework to support general practice, but I made it very clear to them the issue that we have with any support in such a way is that the integration is one part, the funding is one part, workforce one part, but it has to be in a way effective in reversing the trend that on a yearly basis, general practice, there are 50 general practices that close across England as a baseline every year. And as a system of our size, we can't afford even a single one practice closing. So I just want to highlight that.
Okay, good, very good points. Paul? And then
thank you, Chair. Just page 95, I think it is, you talk about primary care access. using the NHS app. Digital exclusion isn't just an issue for the health and care system, it's an issue for us all. We're spending a lot of time working together on it, so I would welcome the opportunity to work in partnership and maybe set local targets for ourselves in terms of how we can work on that issue, on that digital exclusion issue. But also on page 99 we talk about care navigators. I mean, there's also people already in the community. There's also partners who are already in there who could be used in that way, which again I think is really important for us to be looking at ways that we're using other people to be those care navigators. Maybe not the people we would normally expect to be, and think with some ability in terms of risk management. Think about how we might use those other community assets that are there. And again, it's something that certainly we've been working on for quite some time in terms of that whole picture of getting it right first time with people. So we'd welcome working alongside on that.
Thank you. Ben?
Thank you. So from my perspective, I think primary care, like everything else we've talked about earlier, is so under pressure that pressure then moves to other people. And the people I'm speaking to are carers. And so they're left feeling responsible for that person, be it a family member or a friend. And so what I found out last week really was that carers want a lot more information. They want to know what ours are, those additional reimbursable roles, because it's their job to convince that person that is a valuable appointment. Because I was hearing very clearly that as soon as someone is told they can't see their GP but they're given the opportunity to see someone else, they're turning it down and saying they can't see their GP, rather than seeing that there may be an internal referral from that appointment. So I think there's a lot of communication to be done, particularly to enable and support carers, because I do think they are part of this system, and also recognising that we've got a very much a generation of people who see our services as they were a long time ago, and we've got a lot of, and I think the only way we'll be able to support them is through those carers and family members and neighbours and friends.
Thank you. Deborah?
Yeah, a few things I just wanted to note. First of all, in response to your comments, Paul, I think PCNs are doing a lot of work on that, and certainly in my own PCN, not only have we invested in training care navigators within our practices, but we are expanding our PCN care coordinator roles, who kind of do exactly what you're saying. They can put additional support in, they can work with individuals, helping to signpost them to other services. We have a cancer care coordinator, proactive care coordinator, a digital care coordinator who, for example, can help teach people how to use NHS app and other digital ways of accessing care. We're about to recruit a mental health care coordinator to help people navigate the mental health systems. We have really close connections with healthy living advisors and social prescribers, and also the community engagement officers and community connectors within our local authority, and that's working well and proving dividends. So that we are working on that, and it does all help. I very much agree with Lynn's comments about educating the public about the way that primary care has changed and the different roles, and that it's not the sort of traditional thing that you used to see. If you ever watched Peak Practice and some of those programs, that's still what people think it's like. And unfortunately, sometimes it is still portrayed that way, and people get a lot of their education understanding from things that they see in the media or on the television and so on. So that there is a gap to work there. Ian's already mentioned the national insurance contribution. The impact of that on general practice is huge, because unfortunately we're not considered part of the NHS family. We don't get the exemption that bigger trusts get, and that is going to cost thousands of pounds for even small to medium practices, with absolutely no increase in our already stretched budgets. So that is something just to make people aware of. I wanted just to have a little comment on the pharmacy as well, because our pharmacy colleagues, we talked about this at the Primary Care Innovation and Transformation Group, and there are a lot of improvements and positives there. But again, our pharmacy colleagues are really stretched. They also have the impact of these budget pressures, and some of the pharmacy first services are good concepts but aren't easy to enact. They've been put in place without the necessary digital support. Some of the pathways don't work very well. So, for example, the clinical pathways, which is where pharmacists should be able to see people and treat them for simple conditions, thereby diverting from general practice. But they only get paid for that if the person is being referred by general practice. So they have to have gone to their GP first and then have been advised by the care navigators to go to their pharmacy. It's really clunky. Often they don't because they've already hit the practice. And actually our pharmacy colleagues would like just to be able to treat people and be paid. But if they treat them without the referral, they don't get paid for that. Also to highlight that our pharmacy colleagues are also talking about taking collective action, so that may be something that we need to bear in mind for the future. I don't think that's been formally agreed, but they're certainly discussing it. I think those were the main things I wanted to raise. So there is positive, but there remain a lot of pressures.
Thank you. Lynn, final comment.
Thank you. Just to follow on from what Deborah was saying, we have heard very positive feedback about care coordinators, and when we were asking people just to tell us where they were going for medical advice, if they were aware of the care coordinator, that was the first person they wanted to talk to because of that relationship. At the moment, we're just about to complete a survey about pharmacy where we want to hear from the public, but also the pharmacists. So if you're aware of any pharmacists who would like to share their experience anonymously with us to be included in this report, then please encourage them to do it.
Thank you.
One quick one. On digital.
Be quick.
On digital, I know you've talked about the NHS app, thanks ever so much, and it's improved greatly from what it was, so thank you, thankfully. But there is lots of other things. You talked about the low cost, the low, I don't know what you call it, the things that GPs ought not to be doing, somebody else ought to be doing.
Low value tasks.
Yeah, low value tasks, yeah, whatever. But automation is a big way to solve that, and I don't know how we're looking at funding some of that. It can pay for itself within a year. I've seen that in other practices and in other places, that's one. And two, on care coordination and navigation, I don't know how our local authority colleagues are leading on this. I've done some work with Microsoft and actually taking a clinical pathway, feeding it through a platform and doing the care coordination and signposting people through the platform. It's possible to do, and you can have care coordinators to be the companions that see people through. It's very, very valuable and reduces admission rates by about 20%. So of the really high value, high cost, high volume specialties. So I'd really start to look at digital far more innovatively than just using the NHS app.
Absolutely, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. There's so much more to do. I think we need the strong foundations, and we're not starting from a point of great maturity. So we're growing, but absolutely that's the ambition.
And patients are already using it. They're using other ways of actually getting the navigation. I don't know whether you read the article in the BMJ this week around ChatGPT. I'd encourage everybody to read it. Both points of view, I don't know if you've read it.
That's more evening reading than you've given us.
This is not a lot of time for reading.
Thank you very much, everyone. Lots of very useful feedback, Lorna, I think we've had on that particular issue. Huge amount to be done, and key lessons that I've picked up are, first of all, we've got to remember the patients at the end of this process, and I have to say the language is quite confusing. And I think there is a need to simplify to the people in the streets of Wellington and beyond how all this works, because it's not easy. I think the second part is it's great to hear about the interface work with secondary care. That really needs to get all our support, because I think there will be huge benefits to everybody in that regard. And I think the final point is picking up the care navigation points to all of GPs. I think there's a whole think piece around that and the use of digital in that process. So well done, lot to do, and but thanks very much for the start of this journey. Great. Good. I'm afraid we're running a little bit behind, so we're going to have to motor a bit faster now. Maternity and neonatal annual position statement. Anything particularly you want to add to this, Vanessa?
No, just to say this is the first time this paper's come to the board, and from discussion with Simon, we decided an annual position statement to collate really existing information that's already by SAS board reports and also through the LM&S. Of which we've been joined by Sue Ball, who is the programme lead at the end. It collates all the maternity and neonatal kind of high-level assurance in how we know we're assured on maternity and neonatal care, and it also raises some recent issues that we've been addressing along with the neonatal invited mortality review, which provided assurance but also some actions in line with best practice to implement. I would like to just acknowledge that maternity care and neonatal care is so important to our communities, and that when it goes wrong, the impacts on those communities is absolutely huge, and acknowledge, of course, the previous issues that we've had very locally in Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, and those that continue in other parts of the Midlands. So the ongoing work with staff, with families to address any concerns, but we've led several assurance visits recently around engagement of current families that are using the services, which have all led to a high level of assurance.
Okay, thank you. Any points on Vanessa's report? Thank you very much. That's very useful. Thank you. Right, we're moving on to the committee reports. I suggest we move through these quite quickly unless there's anything really major we need to have notified for our attention. So first of all, quality and performance, Meredith.
Thank you, Roger. And the only thing I'd like to draw to the board's attention is the continuing lack of progress around diabetes transformation. I have raised it before, and I'm seeking urgent attention from Lorna and Nigel on this. I've asked for papers, and they're not arriving to QPC, and it's a major issue, and I'm hopeful that they're going to be able to help Quality and Performance Committee find some assurance.
Okay. Can we ask for that to be expedited, please? Okay. Thank you. Audit and Risk Committee's report. Trevor?
Nothing to add. I think just to note that some of the thresholds have been dropped in terms of the tendering and procurement thresholds, which is sort of in line with how other scheme things as well. So hopefully keeping on top of things and all.
Okay.
Clearly an awful lot to keep on top of.
Thank you. So we approve the amendments to the standing financial instructions and financial scheme of delegation. Yep. Thank you. Finance Committee, Dave, anything to report?
No, nothing really. We had the Finance Committee yesterday. I think we had a good meeting, and as Claire reported earlier, we still have a discussion around the unmitigating risks in the position. And noted the conversation around the return that we have to make by Friday, and noting that probably will take us into some areas which are going to be quite difficult to sign off. But it was a good meeting. We noted a number of movements in a number of providers, both in SAP and in RG and Robert Jones as well. So that was very positive.
Okay. Thanks very much, David. Remco report. Trevor, anything to?
Nothing to highlight.
No, thank you. System Transformation Group Chairs report, Simon.
Details there, Chair. Nothing else to add.
Okay. Strategic Commissioning Committee report. We have got no report, but in due course, Nitty will bring back some.
We had, I think the biggest item was the proposed strategic decision-making framework document. That provides a framework for the ICB to commission against, but also to disinvest in commissioning, which was the most significant one that came there. I'm right about that one. And there was a whole bunch around green action plans and our statutory responsibilities about that, which was brought to the committee. And then I think the actions to be considered were the role and visibility of research and innovation in our plans. Doesn't seem to come across anywhere, and at the Strategic Commissioning Committee we recognise that and would like to see it across all our work, research and innovation.
Good, thank you. People, culture and inclusion. Martin, any report?
Yeah, I suppose just to add to the report, we've taken the opportunity, junior members of the committee, just to kind of put a foot on the ball, have a good look at the terms of reference, how it aligns to Stacey's people collaborative, the 4 strands of the people. We've got SROs, delivery plan, the risks. So we're kind of doing a bit of work over the next month or two to make sure we're having a good feel of the committee moving forward, and I'll keep you updated.
Okay, thank you. Keep up the good work. SHIP, anything to report, Andy?
All contained in the report.
Just to note, we include the approval of the terms of the committee's terms of reference. And TWIP, David.
Same, just to point out the 3 priority areas as identified in the report.
Okay, thank you. And again, we include the approval of the committee's terms of reference. Okay, review on risk. I think my summary of the risks that we're facing today are not by any means new, in terms of clearly the long waits on diagnostic treatments. We've got huge financial risks going forward, and as we speak, UEC is obviously a major concern. So those are our key risks that we need to recognise, but they're already recognised. I suppose the question is, going forward, have we got the appetite to change? And I think that's a huge risk. I think there's a risk in 2 areas. First of all, our response to what the government is asking us to do, and our ability to work and think in different ways, and also the realisation that we won't get new money to do that. We're going to have to shift money around, and that's going to be tough. So those are my summaries of the key risks I've distilled from today. Any other business? Okay, well done everyone. That was quite a good heavy agenda, but we made it in the end. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Chair.
And we now resolve that representatives of the press and other members of the public be excluded from the running of the meeting, having regard to the confidential nature of our business. And our next meeting is on the 29th of January here. And in the meantime, I wish you all a good, happy, festive season.